The McFolification of pro wrestling has been a huge problem. I'm going to explain what that term means, even though I kind of should call it the boyhood dream. But we're going to talk about this. Jaida Parker goes on a podcast. It is called No Contest Wrestling Pod. On this podcast, she discusses that she did not watch WWE growing up. And so she really didn't know much about wrestling until she got into it. And she fell in love with jazz, finds jazz very underrated. And she explains what she liked about jazz and how she's going to integrate jazz's aggression and her, intensity into her own character. So the most popular responses to this is none of these NIL talents love the sport. That's why NXT sucks. This is why NXT is a dog shit TikTok reality show with no actual wrestling in it. If this is how the future looks, it's going to be pretty dire. Because Jaida Parker is one of the most talented and one of the biggest pushed NXT talents who did not go through the indies, who went straight to WWE, was not a wrestling fan as a kid. Now, I have to say, I don't remember seeing any of this stuff before Shawn Michaels in '96. I don't remember hearing at all about the boyhood dreams of pro wrestlers and video packages of wrestlers imitating the people that they saw on television. Let's get into it. Shawn Michaels, the boyhood dream, 1996. Everybody knows Shawn Michaels. Vince McMahon screaming at the end of WrestleMania 12, the boyhood dream. Yeah, that was the beginning. That was the seed. What I call is the McFolification of it. Mick Foley in 1990, was it 8 or 9? Or maybe even 7. When they started showing these home movies of Mick Foley jumping off a barn or whatever onto mattresses and telling the story of how he saw Jimmy Snuka leap off the cage at Madison Square Garden and how that inspired him to get into the business, that created a very specific subculture of super nerd wrestling fans who feel the need to get into the business and gatekeep all the other people who get into the business. It became a huge problem. And these people stick out like a sore goddamn thumb. They typically have very bad attitudes and they're very elitist about wrestling. I could just rattle off names like Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, Sasha Banks / Mercedes Moné, Eddie Kingston, just on and on and on with some of these people in modern day who are just geeks. And everything they do is a tribute act to somebody that they watched on television. And it's deeply problematic if we're being honest. All right? Because I don't want to see you do your version of what somebody else did. Look, it's nice that, Mercedes wants to break out a frog splash because she's a big fan of Eddie Guerrero. She wants to break out some of his moves. Okay. But once we got 42 Eddie Guerrero tribute acts running around, every Mexican is doing the Three Amigos and doing a frog splash. Enough's enough. Right? We've got enough of the Eddie Guerrero tributes. We don't need any more. We got Eddie Kingston out here, trying to do the Japanese shit that he saw on videotapes as a kid. But we got 42 fucking guys doing this stuff now. Everybody wants to jump each other on their heads, chop each other in the chest, do the rapid fire kicks in the head, rapid fire chops in the corner. Everybody's watching the same shit now. So you're not being creative. You're not doing anything unique. You're being a tribute act. Enough. Kevin Owens mimicking Stone Cold Steve Austin. All this horse shit. It's like, I get it. You watch this stuff. You're working amongst your heroes now. You're Your heroes are now your peers, kind of. Not peers in a literal sense, but you have access to them. But I'm tired of looking at on Twitter and you see Cora Jade and Roxanne Perez standing there with braces, standing next to CM Punk, like, oh, I was so gobsmacked when I met him for the first time. Ah! And now I get to work with him every week. Ah! That's a big for me, dog. I don't want any more marks in wrestling. No more marks. The marks should be in the crowd, not in the ring. I forgot who said that. Was that Harley Race that said that? So, whoever said that was a genius. Because now the ring is filled with fucking marks. You got Tony Khan, 40-year-old billionaire, doing cosplay of Antonio Inoki, Ichi ni Sanda, and everybody else is looking at him like, what the fuck is wrong with this man? Is something wrong with him? Like, is he got a screw loose? He got a chemical imbalance or something? What's wrong with him? He's like a dork. You don't realize how stupid you sound, how pathetic you look when this is your attitude. These athletes, like Jaida Parker and Obafemi and so many others, they dedicated their lives to the sport that they were involved with. Maybe they know more about the sport that they were involved with because that's what they had to study. They didn't really have a lot of time sitting down watching wrestling, you know? And that's okay because they have people who came before them who were not wrestling fans either. I could start rattling off names that weren't Sting, Lex Luger. Both of them are in WWE Hall of Fame right now. Brock Lesnar, Bill Goldberg. There's so many guys who probably saw their very first match while they were training or something like that because they have something unique about them and an agent, a strengthening coach. Like Brian Pillman wasn't a wrestling fan. Brian Pillman was introduced to wrestling through his strengthening coach at the Cincinnati Bengals. This is how it happens sometimes for people. It's okay for you to not dedicate your whole life to being a pro wrestler when you were 8 years old. And it's okay if you were. But just realize you're probably fucking boring if you dedicated your entire life to being a pro wrestler when you were 8 years old. That means you have no other interests. So that means when you get on the microphone, you ain't got nothing to say except doing your favorite cosplay of whatever wrestler from 22 years ago that you were interested in, that you saw on television, like millions of other people. Right? These athletes bring something different. They bring fresh eyes to the product. They bring fresh eyes to the industry. The idea that this is going to kill the business, no, it may actually save it. It sucks that a lot of NXT is the boyhood dream, the girlhood dream of I turned on the WWE for the first time and I saw Lita. And I was like, ooh, I want to be like Lita. That's Bayley's story. That's Becky's story. These women are 40 now. So what do you think the ones who are coming in who are 23, 24 years old? Yes, they watched so-and-so and so-and-so on television like everybody else. And maybe they happened to see an indie match here and there. Or they went to, their dad took them to an indie show. Or something to that effect. How does that make you a more interesting person? Just because you dedicated yourself to being a pro wrestler when you were 11 years old. No, that doesn't make you a good pro wrestler. It doesn't even make you interesting. What makes you interesting is how you incorporate your interests into wrestling. How do you perform in the ring? How do you perform on the microphone? What is the character you're going to try to produce? This is why Undertaker keeps coming out and saying so many of these guys, they are cosplaying being wrestlers. They're not just being wrestlers. Remember, they pulled Damian Priest aside. Now, he was in his 30s when he got to WWE. And they were like, look, you got to just be a wrestler. You're pretending to be a wrestler. You know, and he was in his 30s. He had already been in the business for 10 years at this point. But he was a super fan of Undertaker, and he's going out there mimicking Undertaker. Okay, that works, I guess, for everybody else who's an Undertaker fan. But what about people who are going to be fans of Damian Priest one day? The marks should be in the crowd where they deserve to be. You need to bring your own flavor. And the people who are going into wrestling now with fresh eyes, they need to learn the business, sure. They need to learn the history of the business, absolutely. But just because they aren't super fans or geeks does not diminish the sacrifices that they're putting in, the time, the work, and all that stuff. What it is, though, and I recognize this, is a lot of it is rank jealousy, right? People always think that these spots are owed to certain people who are fans or certain people who were on the indies for a decade. You deserved what The Miz should have. That was the old CM Punk problem, right? You know, The Miz got the main event of WrestleMania. I didn't. Well, see, guess which one of them is the geek? Well, both of them are geeks because The Miz was also a geek, right? You know, super fan, mimicked The Rock. That's where The Miz came from, right? And then you had CM Punk, who was also a geek. Oh, he wanted to be like Roddy Piper and Stone Cold Steve Austin, who are his heroes, right? But when you have The Miz, who went, worked very little in the indies, went to WWE, became a main event guy, won the world title, main evented WrestleMania, and CM Punk is like, that should be me. I was the one who grew up a super fan. I was the one who worked the indies for, 5, 10, 15 years or whatever the fuck, how long it was. It wasn't 15 years. It wasn't that old. But that's what a lot of fans start thinking now. The fans think that, Jaida Parker is taking up a spot from some indie, some Mercedes Martinez or something like that. Well, no, Jaida Parker is not taking her spot. Jaida Parker is taking Jaida Parker's spot. I know that's what you think. I know that's how you feel. Oh, my favorite indie wrestler would be in WWE right now if they didn't hire all these god darned college athletes. No, they wouldn't, because WWE would have signed them long ago if they wanted to sign them. They don't want to. All right? They don't want to sign them. And now Triple H is in control. They can sign whoever they want. And they still don't want to sign these people. All right? So, no, the rank jealousy, the gatekeeping, it needs to stop. You are the one that's going to try to kill the business. Because I'm already seeing AJ Styles and Kenny Omega clones, and these guys are still wrestling. Like, it used to be at least the guys would retire. Like, when Shawn Michaels started getting his shit eaten up, at least he was near retirement. In some cases, he was already retired. Now these guys are still wrestling, and other people are still in their shit. And you're just kind of like, man, this thing is getting less and less creative. All the matches are starting to look the same. Everybody's story is the same. I grew up watching wrestling with my grandfather. I watched wrestling with my grandma. I watched wrestling on the internet with my best friends. We became super fans, and I decided I'm going to pursue this thing. It's my childhood dream. That's boring, bro. I'm actually taking off points for everybody who comes out now and talk about their childhood dream. And minus 100 points for being a mark. No. We can't do this anymore. That's going to kill the business. Nobody wants to see the marks. Everybody wants to see people who are talented, who are cool, who have a fundamental understanding of human emotions, who have a fundamental understanding of their own character and what their own motivations are and who they should be and how they should be portrayed on TV. All these really cool things that you don't get from sitting on your ass watching somebody else be great, to quote John Cena, right? And we get it, because we see these people all day do tribute moves to other people. I'm tired of it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do tributes. I'm saying it's getting excessive, because there's tributes to the same people. How many Macho Man elbow drops do we need to see on Raw or SmackDown every fucking week? How many frog splashes do I need to see? How many Three Amigos do I need to see every week? At some point, we've reached a breaking point where enough's enough. We've seen enough. The Japanese shit, we've seen enough. Now, on the subject of not having love of the game, sometimes things is just a job, man. For some of these talent, it is just a job. They're big, they're muscular, they're in shape. They're like, hey, look, I'm going to give it a shot. Okay, I'm not against that. If you have the physical attributes, but you don't have the passion, then guess what? You'll get weeded out anyway, because the passion, you ain't going to make it without it. If you don't got the physical attributes, but you do have the passion, you might make it, because you'll overcome your lack of physical attributes. If you don't have any of that, but you have the will to continue, you might make it, because that means you'll never give up. If you get cut by WWE, you'll just go work the indies. Remember, they used to make fun of Sidney Akeem, the guy who was a wrestling fan, by the way, but they made fun of him because he was in the circus, right? He was Reginald in WWE scripts. You know, the guy was a gangbanger too, but they made fun of him because he was in the circus. He's a spot monkey. He don't know how to work. He was in the circus. They're just bringing in people from the circus now. This guy was a fan. You know, WWE, you know, and Cirque du Soleil saved his fucking life. That's an interesting character. That's the kind of guy I do want to get to know a little bit more about on television. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but he went to the indies and he hasn't given up and he's still working hard. And who knows, maybe he'll be back one day. Maybe he'll end up in AEW. Maybe he'll end up in TNA, but he hasn't given up. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. And yes, he's doing some of the most cartoonish spots in wrestling right now. I mean, he's just doing like some kind of double somersault cutters and all this kind of ridiculous stuff. But at the very least, he's doing something different. And he's got a different story. An interesting life. That's the kind of shit that I'm talking about. I don't know whether he watched wrestling as a kid or not. I don't know. He maybe. It's not important. What's important is he has the desire to do it. He has the work ethic. He has the guts to try it. And he's willing to fall and get back up. He has the persistence. That's what's needed to succeed in any endeavor. And he chose to try to succeed in pro wrestling. Now, I'm going to close on this because I saw this comment too. That this actually was a comment that came out. I'm going to paraphrase it. I'm not going to read it exactly. But the comment was, WWE keeps signing talent that when they cut them, they disappear. And they said like Mandy Rose was one of those talents. Like, oh, she worked in WWE and nowhere else. Soon as she got cut, she left wrestling because she didn't care about wrestling anyway. Well, guess what? That's fine. Now, she left wrestling because she makes more money doing OnlyFans and all that kind of stuff. But guess what? It's fine. So what? I mean, if she decided to go in a different direction with her life, so what? How is that taking anything from anyone? She dedicated her life to wrestling for a little time. She worked hard at getting good at it. She was getting better. It got taken away from her. She decided, I'm going to go in a different direction. There's tons of people like that. A lot of the women from the Divas era, they went and started going back to doing modeling or bodybuilding or whatever the hell else they were doing. And their wrestling time was just the time that they were involved in wrestling. And that's what happens with everybody eventually anyway. Every wrestler, regardless of their level of success or whether they were born in the business or not, they eventually leave. And you have to move on and go to a different part of your life. Tito Santana is a goddamn teacher or something now. People move on. Your wrestling career comes to an end. Whether it comes to an end at 25, whether it comes to an end at 35, or whether it comes to an end at 60. It's going to come to an end eventually. So everybody's leaving the business one way or the other. Okay? Unless you end up like a lifer, like a Shawn Michaels or a Triple H, where you go to work somewhere and then they move you into the office and you never leave. If you get one of those cushy gigs, and maybe you'll be in the business forever. But most wrestlers, they work 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. They leave the business. They never talk about it, and nobody ever mentions them ever again. Or they mention them only in passing. And that's about it. And that's how wrestlers operate. it should not be an offense to the fans that the wrestler moved on in their life. And I get it that wrestling fans are clingy. That's what makes them geeks, a lot of them. And the wrestling media is just as geeky, right? And wrestling fans get a little clingy. They get to begging. Oh, would you come back to wrestling? I loved you when you were in wrestling. They hitting Mandy Rose up constantly. When you coming back to wrestling? You should come back to wrestling. Oh, we loved you in wrestling. Like, okay, look, man, she's taking thong pictures right now. She ain't got time to take no goddamn tombstones. All right, she don't want to take choke slams right now. Right? She going to tan her ass to sell it on OnlyFans. She don't want to hear no more about how much you loved her at NXT Heatwave or whatever the fuck. Stop being a dork. It's off-putting. You're running off fans and you're running off athletes. And guess what? This business needs more athletes. It needs more people with size and charisma and work ethic and persistence. And it doesn't matter if they weren't fans. Because they don't have to be. This is a job. As long as they can do the job, I don't have nothing else to say. Peace out.
Yeah. We're just gonna